Stand by. Stand by.
Well, good evening. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of January 15th, 2020 to order. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first order of business will be the public comment, the initial public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. And that has to do with the Railroad Avenue building, the wastewater treatment facility on Railroad Avenue. And each person would have up to 5 minutes to speak. If an agenda item is also listed as a public hearing, folks may wait to speak until that particular item. And I wanted to point that out, that this agenda item 3, which is the resolution regarding that building, is a public hearing, and so you'll have a lot of opportunity to speak to that matter at that time if you'd like. Would anyone like to speak now? We'll start with the gentleman by the aisle. Please state your name.
My name is Glenn Fay. Good evening, Commissioners, City staff. I want to speak about the water treatment plant. You know, it's about probably the most historic building that's still left standing in Boulder City. If we leave it commercial, it leaves the potential for it to be sold. Once it's sold, we can kiss it goodbye, because there's nothing to prevent somebody from ever coming in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, from tearing it down and bulldozing it down, because there's nothing that our city can do at this time to stop something like that from happening. I would encourage you to go with the park. It does give another layer of protection for it, because it would then have to be changed from park back to commercial and be sold. It makes it a little bit more difficult for something like that to happen. It's a wonderful building, with a little love from the city and the citizens and stuff like that. It's already been shown that it's happening. You know, somebody donated a new roof for that building because they cared about saving that building. I think you ought to think long and hard about, let's keep it, make it a park. I mean, it's been called a park for years. You've got the Reflections Park there. You've got the garden people gardening there. There's events that go on there that are open to the public and for the public. If it ever goes into private hands, so we might not ever be able to get inside it again. Who knows what they might do to it. I would like to see it stay as something that's there for the public. Probably the best way of doing that would be to make that a park. Thank you for your time.
I think you got beat.
Good evening, Commission members. My name is Ray Turner, and I hope some of the things I want to say don't sound redundant already. Long before I became involved in preservation issues, I appreciated the beauty, peace, and quiet of the property known as Teddy Fenton Memorial Park, which houses the historic water filtration plant, community gardens, and Reflection Sculpture Park. I've also been a gardener at the community gardens for 7 years. And also, I'd just like to point out that it was a water filtration plant for drinking water. So just in case people think it's for wastewater, it's actually was to provide drinking water. I've been involved with the Boulder City History and Arts Foundation since its creation, which came about as a response to the proposed demolition of the historic Boulder City Hospital, which, because of its being privately owned, was eventually torn down. We came together at that time 5 years ago as concerned residents who value our historic structures and places in an effort to prevent more demolitions and loss of historic artifacts. The water filtration plant is arguably one of the most iconic and historic structures in southern Nevada. Its construction was part of the Boulder Dam construction project, and to this day, the building stands as an impressive historic artifact in its own right. The interior of this building is largely untouched and houses the famous pipe gallery underground, which has been one of the favorite features of this building with attendees on the many tours that the Boulder City History and Arts Foundation has organized in an effort to raise awareness about this very important part of our history. Approving this zone change to government park status would demonstrate that we care about the preservation of our historic structures. It would also help in the efforts to start serious fundraising to continue with restoration efforts, which began in 2018 with the generous donation of a fully restored roof valued at $50,000 by a Boulder City resident, Mr. Scott Donnelly. As a gardener at the community gardens, I've experienced and witnessed the anxiety that's been caused to my fellow gardeners regarding the limbo status of this property. The gardens were built by Boulder City residents, and I feel the gardens should be officially recognized as a park. We have a piece of property here that has provided respite and recreation for the community for over 20 years now, and I think that the property has more than demonstrated its importance to the community and is deserving of official park status. Getting back to the filtration plant, this town exists for one reason only, and that reason is water. I hope one day that the water filtration plant will be restored and opened to the community and visitors to enjoy and learn about our unique history, and that the building and surroundings be treated with the dignity that they deserve. Thank you very much, and I hope you make the right decision tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak at this moment? Mr. Sanayakan?
It's a public hearing. If I speak now, there's a second opportunity after I've heard what's been said.
Yes, I believe that's true. This is the initial public
public
comment.
hearing, right, okay.
And there'll be a hearing later.
That's one of the most unique historic properties that Boulder City has. It's a logo. It's something that can be used in letterhead. It's a shame that it's been neglected as it has. It hasn't gotten the maintenance that it's deserved. It's been left literally to rot. It's been left without even a roof in proper condition. It's been left to be vandalized. There's no reason for that building to not have some kind of a security or alarm system or lights, where I was told that just recently a window got pulled out and it was vandalized. The Boulder City doesn't have that many historic properties. When Boulder City presents itself, it presents itself as a historic community, but when you start to go down the inventory, a lot of the houses have been changed, a lot of the buildings in the commercial district have been modified, and without protection, without a flagship like that building, it lacks the impetus. There has to be something that motivates people. The city council is moving toward dedicating more funds toward that. From a practical standpoint, a commercial use in that building would be unfair to the neighborhood. People have invested their hearts and their money in preserving the houses on Birch and Cherry and Ash. The people coming from the downtown are bombarded by music now from the bars that are operating against the code by playing loud music into the night. To have that subject from the other end and have it in stereo coming at them, I'd like to see it preserved as a park, and I would like your action and the council's action by preserving it as a park to be an impetus to say Boulder City is now, after 20 years of neglect, going to promote historic preservation. And the same should carry forward toward the hangar and an inventory of our other buildings. If Boulder City is going to present itself as an historic place, it should take steps to do that. with the traffic down by 50% and businesses being hurt tragically along the highway with major drop in sales, we have businesses like Burger King and the Dinosaur Place and the Alpaca Store and the gift shop and traffic down at the gas stations folding. If Boulder City is going to use itself as historic to help bring people into the area, it should take steps to do that. And one of the ways to do that would not to let that building go commercial and lose control of it. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Judy DeShane.
Thank you.
My feelings are this, my understanding is that this property with the building was given to the city by the federal government when we actually became a city. It was built in 31, 32, so it's one of our original structures. It hasn't been modified, but if it was given to the city, to me, that means it was given to the citizens of the city. And that means the citizens should have access and be able to use it and enjoy it as it currently is, as opposed to it being private property. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Mr. Turner.
Grant Turner, lifelong Boulder City resident. To be clear, what we're talking about is the water treatment building and not Reflections Park and not the community gardens, which I think are separate issues. The question of whether or not the water treatment building should be used commercially, not only has that question not been answered, it has not been asked. The residents, I agree with a lot of what Neil and Judy said. That building should belong to the residents. The residents should have a voice. The last time that building was active was about 3 months after I was born. So that's 37 years of it sitting there with no direction and no purpose. And to say that the interior of the building is largely untouched is not true at all. It has been vandalized. All the copper has been stripped out of the conduit. I spent about a month in there with my father doing graffiti remediation painstakingly with a soda blaster because anything else would have ruined the brick. I care deeply about the building. And I'm not saying let's make it a bar. I'm not saying let's make it a restaurant or a wedding venue or a coffee shop or a farmer's market. I'm saying let the residents decide. Let's ask the residents of Boulder City if they want to use their tax dollars to convert it to a park and let it continue to be a burden. To Neil's point, that businesses are folding in Boulder City. Is another park going to attract more visitors to Boulder City, more so than a commercial use for, in my opinion, the most beautiful building in Boulder City, the most beautiful historic brick building in Boulder City? I feel strongly that the residents of Boulder City should decide this issue and not 3 people. And to do anything before polling the citizens of Boulder City is premature. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, please.
Sorry for the notes, it's less than 2 minutes. My name is Britt West. I'm here today to represent 3 family-owned properties in the historic district. All 3 of these properties are within 1,000 feet of the park. I appear before you today as both a homeowner and a Nevada certified real estate appraiser. I'm the immediate past president of the Appraisal Institute for the entire state of Nevada. Our appraisal and valuation practice extends to every county in Nevada, including many small towns that have issues similar to ours. As a homeowner and a grandfather to 4 children who enjoy this park, we ask that the corrective zoning be put in place. When we bought our homes within the historic district, proximity to parks was very important to us. As part of our purchase of these properties, we conducted our due diligence, and the subject was noted to be a park in the city literature. We use the park at least twice a week. It is a park. As a Nevada certified real estate appraiser, I can report that if this property is allowed to have a commercial use in the future, there will likely be a detrimental effect to the residential property values in the market area. There are case studies that support this. I will agree that the property is not currently being used to its highest and best use. Parks and government spaces never are. There are many higher and better uses for the park that have been discussed within our community. These alternative uses do not involve a commercial use. Many are found within other similar communities in Nevada. These uses should be further explored. Again, we are in favor of the proposed corrective zoning to the GP zone to be consistent with the current use and the historic use, and to be consistent with the desires of many residents. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, and I'm not sure whether we're allowed to ask questions at this point.
Sure if you are either, but I'd
We're not.
throw it out there.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Powell. I live just steps away from the park, and I was a gardener in the park for 12 years. And I'll just remind you, your map shows the entire area, including the sculpture garden and the community gardens and the building, as being a park, even the parking lot as being part of what you're considering, and not just the building. Hundreds of people have used this area. I've gone over to the park almost every day and see people walking their dogs every day. Hundreds of people have used the community gardens as a park. They walk their dogs through the park. They walk to see what's growing in the park. People use the sculpture garden. They use the building, the exterior of the building, for photographs, for family photographs. The building does have a use. It has a use as a park. The area has a use as a park. It should be zoned a park. It has been de facto a park for the last 20 years, since it was landscaped by Damon Oler King. There is no need for the building to have a commercial use. It doesn't need to have a use of the interior, because the exterior of the building is an iconic building, and the architecture of the building is reflected by the rest of the historic district. It doesn't need to have a particular use. If it does have a use, it should be for community. I live right there. This area should remain a park, and it is well known that community gardens raise the property value of all the areas around them. So the area should remain a park.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Back.
My name's Larry Turner. Just this week, I asked the city for some information on the community gardens. There are 25 spots there. 17 of them have been used by the same people since 2013. There's a waiting list since 2018 that includes 20-some people, one of which is gardening kids of Boulder City, and they can't get a plot in there. And if you drive by, it's not a beautiful thing. It sort of gives you the feel that Tijuana used to have. So I'm all for a community garden, but this is not really a community garden. This is a garden for 25 people, and it's not that well maintained, and it's not pretty at all.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Waits, and I'm a local gardener and a resident of 20 years plus here in Boulder City. I would like to look at the aspects of our past, present, and future of this block that contains Teddy Fenton's Reflection Center Park, the community gardens, and our water treatment building. In the past, I do want to bring up some names that brought us where we're at. The stories that we have of Tom Godby, of one of the first families of Boulder City, that worked at the treatment plants, and that his family, fifth generations now of Godby families that are here and have been involved not only in historic preservation, but also with gardening and community development. Teddy Fenton, another name that we pay homage to her through all of her efforts and donations. She was a gracious lady that made the Reflection Center Park possible for us. And Damon, thanks for mentioning Damon. Through his design and his organizational efforts, that he was able to bring together not only the Reflection Center Park and community gardens that he worked so hard on, he also did all of the plantings and plantings as an urban forester here for our VA home. And in the present, what we see at Reflection Center Park, that we do have a reorganization of the Desert Sculptors. And as a community effort, they have teamed with the Wilbur Weed, our original landscape designer. The Wilbur Weed Garden Initiative, it's a worldwide garden initiative that we have become a part of, and through the Kids Garden Club and the Daughters of American Revolution, we have pollinator gardens there. We have more sculptures that are in the plans and works, and also for community projects of cleanups and maintenance of not only the community gardens, but all the areas, of that block. Looking towards the future for this, the Boulder City Kids Garden Club, which is not the group that is on hold for a plot at the gardens, I want to add, under Mrs. Tillman, is in the process of being organized at this time. And so they will be friends of the gardens and of the park. So when we're talking about a property that has been in disrepair and neglect, I'm not saying that we haven't been there, but I really am hoping that we don't end up in the same place that we did with the hospital, because when you drove by that property and you saw the neglect of it, you lost your own value or worth that you felt for that property, and it was almost as if the people of Boulder City were punished for that. That it was very easy for everybody to, to give a blind eye to the historic hospital being taken away. And I don't want to see anything like that happen to this really treasure, valuable treasure. And I mean of sentiment, like a MasterCard commercial, it's priceless, of what the impact of that property has done for us. And as far as money's coming back into that, I can't help but look at numbers myself. And we have approximately 105.3 million sustainable U.S. travelers. These are people that are prioritizing vacations so that they're able to not only go out and investigate and visit any type of environmental spots like we have in Boulder City, Clean Green Boulder City, but that they're actually going to take that message back, and so that it can go forward for other tourists as well. Ecotourism has been booming since the mid-teens here, so for about 5 to 6 years. And in North America, it is a top leading tourism industry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In the back, I see a hand.
Good evening. My name is Blair Davenport. I too support maintaining the property as a park and zoning it or having it rezoned as a government park. I would like to add that the water plant is in fact a crown jewel amongst the community garden and the sculpture garden, especially within the historic district. The building, or the property, I should say, is truly not an ugly property. It's not an eyesore. It's not, I don't believe, hurting anyone's property value in the vicinity of the property. I don't think it's a major public nuisance. It's not blight. Don't think it's posing any kind of a public health issue. So even though it's been in a state, or it's been in its current state for years, it's still a crown jewel. Don't feel as there's a need for the city to dispose of it or to sell it, just for the sake of the city might believe that they cannot maintain it or manage it. There are a number of different ways to maintain a historic structure at the public level. And by maintaining it as a park, which implies it's a public location or facility, then the next steps are to determine what and how to use that property, or how the city should do so. And there's a number, like I said, a number of different ways to do that through long-term leasing, caretaking. The city has proven that they have a really good handle on how to manage leases, and if the city were to go forward and do something with that facility, or that building, I should say, through a lease agreement, that would be a wonderful opportunity to solicit opinions from the public, especially the neighborhood, to determine what those uses are. And I would offer that the Historic Preservation Committee can assist with that in garnering city or community input. There's the State Historic Preservation Office, and there are a number of other historic preservation organizations within the state of Nevada, as well as nationwide, that have lots of information or who can offer assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And before you start, I'm going to suggest that we do allow the city staff to kind of brief us all on this matter, and just make sure maybe that'll help answer some questions that might be out there and such after your comments.
Okay, thank you. I'm Chris Goggin. I'm a resident here in Boulder City. I'm a licensed... Chris Goggin. Yes, Goggin. I'm a licensed mechanical engineer in the state of New York and North Carolina. I've been here about 8 years, and I took the tour of that water treatment plant last year. I have to say I was very fascinated with it, and I'm not going to comment on real estate values or any emotional things. I'm going to give you the boring technical side of it that you should hopefully understand. That plant's based on 2,000-year-old Roman water filtration technology. It works. And it works down to about 300 parts per million water purification, which is in line with what we get today out of the taps here in Boulder City. It's a marvel. It's a concrete plant. Nobody talks about that down the lake because it's almost underwater. But this is obviously front and center. But from an engineer, from a perfectly, completely technical standpoint, it really is a marvel. And I kind of I'm a big history buff. It kind of reminds me a little bit when Rome fell and the Dark Ages started. All these things, libraries and technology and concrete, all these things were lost and eventually reborn through the Middle Ages, thankfully through the church. And that plant is actually, from an engineer's standpoint, it's a very simple, effective design. It works well. It's a big sand filter in there, and they have chemicals that process the waters down to about 300 parts per million, taking pathogens out and impurities and whatnot. And why would I want to see it there? Well, it's inspirational, really, from a technical standpoint. It's a very simple, effective design. It worked. It's amazing what they did. I mean, they had to build all the support just to build the dam, and not including all the prior work they had to do on the river to make sure that they weren't going to silt out the downriver and everything else. But that plant, just be aware that is, from an engineer standpoint, that is a very much a technical gem. I would hate to see it erased in some manner. So that's basically it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Interesting. We'll close this initial public hearing. Again, remember this public comment period, remember there will be a full hearing when we address this subject. The next order of business is election of planning commission officers, and so in January of each year we elect a chairman and a vice chairman. And so I would look to the planning commissioners to provide nominations for chairman and vice chairman.
Right off the bat, Paul, I would very much like to see you as the next chairman. You've been around quite a while. I think you know the ropes, and you've done a good job in positions you have held. So I'd make a motion for you as chair.
Any other nominations?
I would nominate Steve Walton.
Can we nominate someone who's not here?
If he were elected, obviously he could not serve tonight as he's not present. We're hoping to have him back next month. And
good.
the vice chairman, as elected, would serve for tonight if that's the case.
Okay. Well, I can, go ahead.
Are we going to proceed with the chairman, and then once that's settled, then we'll do the vice? Okay.
Sure. Do you have another nomination for, okay. So we have myself and Steve Walton. I certainly can support Steve Walton as well. It's kind of an odd position. I could, so how do we do this? Do I just take,
Yeah.
okay, close the nominations, and all in favor of Steve Walton, please say aye.
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 I can go with that, aye. So Steve Walton's the new chairman.
I didn't hear him.
Yes.
Okay, good. I shy away from that role, you see. I've been here 14 years and I can do that. Anyway, so let's bring up nominations for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Nate Lassoff.
I'd like to nominate Paul Matuska.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, let's just go for a vote right now. Do we need a second for either of those names?
Yeah.
For those nominations, we do.
Are there any more nominations?
Oh, any more nominations,
Yeah.
right? Nope. Okay, so let's vote on. Let's vote on Nate Lassoff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry, Nate. Nay. I'd like to be vice chair, but go ahead.
Nay.
I'll defer to Paul.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, even though that vote was 3-3, knowing that, you now call for the vote on nominating Mr. Matuska, and we'll see if that turns out any differently.
Could we have a vote on nominating myself? This isn't as easy as it looks up here, folks.
I have a question for staff. Can I vote aye on both? No? Okay.
No, it's a new vote. New vote.
It's a new vote, so it's aye or nay.
That's what you're asking. Yes. Basically, the first vote effectively failed to a degree because it was a 3-3 vote. So it doesn't matter. You're allowed to vote differently now if you wish.
Do we need a motion or what?
Yes, let's go with a motion. Would you make a
I'll
motion?
repeat my motion. I would still nominate yourself for
Okay.
vice chair.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye or nay?
Aye.
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 All right. Well, with that song and dance over, next order of business is approval of the minutes of the December 18th regular meeting. Do we have a motion? Okay.
Approval.
Second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. So this brings us to the third order of business. And I was wondering if perhaps, I have a suspicion we'll have a fair bit of public comment once again. I can't see the clock, and it might not hurt if we could move that. Oh, I see, it goes all the way across. Well, never mind. I think we'll, I can see the red light when it turns on. Ah, thank you, I appreciate that.
And it beeps when it gets to the 5 minutes.
Ah, very good, very good. Okay. So agenda item number 3 for possible action, AM-20-345, resolution number 1186, City of Boulder City, 300 Railroad Avenue. This item is a public hearing and recommendation to the City Council on an application to amend the zoning map to rezone approximately 1.92 acres from C1 Neighborhood Commercial to GP Government Park. And if we could start with the staff report on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Per direction from the City Council, the historic water filtration plant site is being proposed to be rezoned to the GP Government Park Zone to reflect existing uses. As the report notes, the site actually consists of 3 parcels. The city technically owns the largest parcel, which contains the historic water filtration plant, the sculpture park, and part of the community gardens. The Bureau of Reclamation technically owns 2 smaller properties in that area, but staff is working with that agency to get those transferred to the city per the terms of the original agreement when the Department of Health and Human Services was transferring the property to the city. No change is being proposed to the use of the property at this time. It is merely the zoning of the property, which the 3 properties constituted an entire block, as directed by the City Council. You've got a copy of the zoning ordinance for the G zones in front of you, so you can see that the GP zone is pretty simple. It just currently lists as allowed uses, all dedicated and/or designated park and recreational areas. The staff report gives you some zoning history regarding the area. It's been zoned within the commercial zone category since 1967, along with the rest of the properties fronting on Colorado Street, west of Railroad, as you can see per that exhibit map. However, the master plan for the property was changed to public and quasi-public use in 1994, and with the 2003 master plan, the block was shown as Parks and Recreation. The staff report also goes over the use history of the property. As noted, the filtration plant is no longer active, but it was built for that purpose and served that purpose for many decades for Boulder City. And then in, 1994, the City Council gave permission for a private organization to install sculptures and landscaping on the property for what is now referred to as Teddy Fenton Memorial Park. And in 1998, the council allowed part of the property to be used for community garden purposes as proposed by other local organizations. As part of our land management process, the site was previously considered in 2005 for potential uses as either conversion to a single-family residence or for use by community organizations, but those options were removed from the land management process in 2019. The staff report goes on to evaluate the ordinance criteria with regard to present land uses and present zoning in the area. And as you can see, essentially there's, for the most part, single-family uses to one side of the property and commercial uses to the other side of the property. And the required drainage report from the city is attached. The character of the existing area has both of those light industrial as well as single-family residential uses, but the proposed zoning of Government Park is in conformance with the master plan designation of park use for this block. And if the Planning Commission chooses to recommend approval of this request, you would just simply pass the resolution, which is a recommendation. If you choose to recommend against this request, you don't pass a resolution for that. It would just simply be a motion to recommend that the zoning remain the same.
Any questions of staff?
If the parcel now is small enough that it wouldn't have to go to a vote for the city to sell it, but with the two reclamation pieces put together, would it still have to go to a vote for the city if the city was going to sell it in the future?
Actually, the property the city owns is over an acre, so yes, it is. So if the city were to consider selling it, which is certainly not on the table with the current city council, it would require a vote of the people.
So either way, the city stays in control of the property, and whatever happens to it, the city, even if we rezone it, the city still stays in control of it, correct?
The ownership is not proposed to change.
Yeah, the city owns it, so they'll still stay in control. Okay, thanks.
Susan, just for clarity, on the GP is a very open, just park recreation. Can more specific uses come up that would have to, for that area, that would then have to come back before the commission? Or is it just, it would have to be a park or maintained as a park as it currently is?
Based on the current code language?
Current code language.
The only uses are park and recreational areas.
And so if we move the zoning forward as GP, that is what it will be?
That's correct.
Correct. Now, if for some reason the city chose to take a portion of that and make it parking, could that be done, or would that again require a special come back before commission, council? How would that work?
For parking?
If for some reason the city said they wanted to do that.
Well, as long as the parking is related to the use of a park, because that's normally...
It could be like overflow for events and stuff like that. Just, I'm hypothesizing, obviously.
Well, most park uses, we provide parking lots for the parks so that the public coming to the park has a place to park.
Okay.
At the park.
Yes, it's basically an ancillary use. Okay. A parking lot is an ancillary use to a park.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any reason why the city can't use it as a park right now?
No. In fact, that's probably why it hasn't been rezoned previously. Technically, park uses are a conditional use in the C1 zone, so there's no reason that you couldn't have a park within the current zoning.
Susan, in our master plan under the Parks and Rec PR4, coordination of new facilities, city shall coordinate with internal service departments, including Parks and Recreation, Community Development, Public Works departments, and the planning and provision of new parks and recreation facilities. Would that apply to this particular parcel? And if so, has city staff weighed in on what this would require for the city to maintain this park?
I'm sorry, what were you just referencing? Were you referencing a certain part of the code?
In our master plan. the coordination of new facilities, because obviously it's operating as a park, but it's not a park that the city is maintaining. So if this is a new park, the city shall coordinate with internal service departments, including the Parks and Recreation, Community Development, and Public Works Department, in the planning and provision of new parks and recreation facilities. My question is, would that apply, and has the city weighed in on what it's going to take to maintain this as a park in the future?
I apologize for not having that answer right now, simply because I'm not sure we can actually say that the city doesn't do maintenance there. It's true that obviously the city doesn't necessarily have the desired budget that, some residents would like to maintain the building, but I do believe that there is some money that the Parks and Rec Department, or that part of their budget, that is included within the parks, that I believe to a degree that they maintain. I know that initially the sculpture park and gardens were basically, for the most part, built, and created by private organizations, but I can't say that there is no city maintenance of it currently.
Mr. Vice Chairman, maybe just to add to answer the question of Commissioner Lassoff. As part of the annual budget process, all the departments do coordinate on operational and identification of budgetary issues. That's what helps to provide the recommendations for the capital improvement plan that is considered by the City Council each year. So in response to that portion of the comprehensive plan, that is being addressed through the budget process on an annual basis.
I got one more question. Are the people that are operating at the community gardens, are they paying land lease to the city?
Fortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know. We know that there are certain people that utilize the community gardens. I don't know the terms of that, but that's certainly something that we can provide to the commission in a future meeting. We do.
Susan, can I just get some clarification on the current zoning versus the recommendation for the park designation? Right now, although it's in C1, it is designated a park and has been maintained and operated as such since the donation of that land. Is that true?
As I said, unfortunately, if I'd known there would be questions about maintenance of the park, I would have asked the Parks and Rec Director to be here.
How about the use part? So to date, it's been used in that manner?
Well, yes, since the City Council agreed to allow both the sculpture park and the community gardens, I believe shortly after those approvals, the organizations moved forward to implement those.
So from my understanding then, there's nothing preventing the City Council to continue to keep that as a park with the C1 zoning. And if it were to be designated a government park, what we lose is the ability to do anything else in the future unless they came back here and changed the zoning again.
That would be a correct summary.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So under the C1 commercial zoning, neighborhood commercial zoning, under which it currently resides, what are some of the, I guess I'm wondering, what are some of the limitations on that use? For instance, is the city allowed to sell that property? Or must it remain in the hands of the city? Excuse me, sorry to continue.
The premise certainly of a government zone is that normally we only zone land to any of the government zones when it's owned by some public agency. But nonetheless, The zoning of land, when it's owned by the city, it doesn't legally constrict the city council from moving forward with any action, in this case, say, to put the property forward to a vote of the people to see if they were in favor of, disposing of the property.
Okay. And so that lack of restriction, would that exist if it were to be zoned GP as proposed? In other words, does the government park zoning have such a restriction against sale?
No.
Okay.
Technically, you'll see that in Chapter 16 for the government zones, the only reference to that is that in the government open space zone, the code references that those are supposed to be for areas which should not be included for land sale because they are or will be needed by the city for public or quasi-public uses and to preserve open space real property. However, that statement theoretically could apply to, any of the government zones. And so over the next year, as we work with the Planning Commission to get the zoning ordinance cleaned up and updated, because we're in the process right now with the city of updating and recodifying the rest of the city codes. Certainly the language in these government zones, can be evaluated and reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council to see how that, should better be refined. Because it's not as if only the GO zone would necessarily have that kind of, would be appropriate for that kind of limitation. As I said, typically you would expect any property that is zoned for government to be owned by a public agency, regardless of which subcategory of government zone it is.
And my last question, under a government park zoning, is there opportunities, I guess I'm thinking for commercial use, and I'm thinking more on the lines of like the National Park Service, where they have concessionaires that have some form of a lease or, fiduciary interest with the city. Would there be the opportunity for short or long-term or even special event concessionaires under GP zoning?
One would expect that any such subleases would have to be related to some type of park or recreation use under the current language of the code. As you know, of course, just like zoning of land can be changed by the city council, the language of the zoning ordinance can also be changed by the city council. Both of those involve public hearing processes, and both of those would come before the Planning Commission. And as I mentioned, most likely when, during this next year, as we're going through the zoning ordinance to clean things up, this chapter will be discussed.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
No, not so much a question. I'd like to make a comment. I moved here in 1993, and the first year I was here, I went on a tour of the inside of that building and the grounds. And like everyone else, I fell in love with that building right away. It's a beautiful example of architecture of that time and functionality. The concern I have with rezoning it is that I think that rezoning it to a government park would completely shut down any further discussion about possible uses for that site. It's got fantastic potential, and Boulder City is full of creative and smart people. And I'd like to see town hall meetings and different propositions discussed, see what the residents feel about it. And I think that rezoning will have the opposite effect.
We will have the opportunity to share our own thoughts.
Susan, maybe even Michael, is there anything stopping City Council from doing a deed restriction today, tomorrow, whenever in the near future for no demolition of that building?
deed restriction would be tied to some type of land sale. So certainly any type of a decision that is made to sell land that complies with the city code and the city charter, and in the case of any property over 1 acre, which requires the vote of the people, the city council could certainly negotiate a deed restriction.
Sorry. With that, I'll open the public comment to this item. I'm sorry, the public hearing to this item. Thank you, and let's start.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a request to anybody in the audience, I would be curious to hear ideas about how we would utilize that building as a park. I get the outside of that building as a park. We hit the nail on the head on that one. But how would that building be a park?
Fair question. So if you could provide some opinion on those as well. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be put on the spot, but those who come up to speak, if they so choose to offer opinion, please do. And if you could once again state your name, we appreciate it.
My name is Glenn Fan. A little earlier, one of the people here that are, shall we say, in interest of keeping it as commercial, said that there's no intention, had never brought up the idea of for being used for commercial. But I've got something here that was written by that individual. A few months ago, I made a post on Facebook proposing the idea of repurposing the water treatment building as a brewery, coffee shop, wedding venue, or any number of concepts that would allow the public to enjoy this. So right there, somebody's trying to blow some smoke up you. They said a little while ago that, no, that's not, we don't want to do that. Right there, they do. But all right, I'll take on a challenge from Nate and stuff like that on a short thing. I'd like to see that building be turned into a museum because somebody stated earlier that water is our history. It is a neat building. I think if we could turn it into a museum, it's another attraction to draw people in. I don't know if the city would make any money on it. You put a $2 admission charge on it or something like that. You'd get enough money probably just to maintain it. To buy some paint, replace a broken window now and again. It'd be pretty basic, to convert it over to that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of rules that come in, the ADA and stuff like that. But you could have it display it, just on the main floor for people to come in, and there'd be pictures of what the plant looked like when it was, or what this did, and how that, these big holes in the ground. Explain what those big holes in the ground were. Pictures of all the pipe work that's underneath, and the motors and the pumps that are down there. So you just walk in the door, they could have the whole history of that building laid out. Be another attraction. We've got the park in there, and then while they're there, they take a walk through Reflections Park. Maybe make the garden area a little bit bigger, so you get, instead of just 25 people in there, maybe we could find a way of doubling it. There's a big area down below, old parking lot. Tear that up, turn that into more gardens. Now you got another 50, 75 people in there gardening. I think there's a lot of ways to use it. Now, that's just off the top of my head. I mean, you just kind of caught me short here. But I mean, that's just, if we get the whole community talking about it and thinking about it, we make it a park, what can we do? There's people out there willing to do things. So we donate a whole new roof for that place. Maybe somebody else will come up and donate new windows for it. Maybe somebody else will come up and donate, repaving the parking lot or resealing it or something. I think there's a lot of ways that we can utilize that park, and I think it could be a gem. Another one of our great parks. And also, as the question about changing from C1 to park and stuff like that for selling. I think if it's changed to a park and stuff like that, if the city tries to sell it, now it goes out to the people to vote on. Yeah, we're proposing to sell a park. I think you get a lot more pushback from the people about, I don't think we should sell a park. Selling a piece of C1, people, yeah, okay, fine, we'll sell that. The city can use the money. But if it's designated as a park, I think that adds protection we need because people aren't going to want to sell a park. Thank you.
Ray Turner. Yeah, I'm the one that mentioned water, and it's the obvious, in my opinion, it's the obvious use for the building in the future is a museum-type setting. It's a classic example of our history that people can walk up and touch, never mind go on the inside. People driving by just stop their cars and come up all the time when I'm there gardening. They come up and they're taking pictures and they want to know, they're asking, hey, what is this place? People want to know. And even if the building was never opened to the public, it's an iconic structure and a piece of the Boulder Dam project that people can access without even going down to the dam site itself. People visiting Boulder City, if they knew it existed, I'm sure would enjoy visiting a place like that. Contrary to what Grant said about the interior of the building not being untouched, it basically is untouched. So the copper wiring is gone, but can you tell that when you walk up and you look inside the building? No, you can't tell that. But you can go downstairs and see the pipe gallery that has a mile of massive pipes. It's a very impressive building inside and out. And in my opinion, it should have a museum type use in the future, and I think that's very appropriate. I'm from Ireland, and there's a lot of parks in Ireland that house historic buildings, and they've been used for museum type situations. Some of them have a coffee shop attached, some of them have a gift shop attached. There's lots of creative ways that we can use this building for the benefit of the public, and it needs to be protected. That's why we're all here tonight, and that's why we've been asking for 5 years for something to be done and promoting its preservation. It's a very important part of the community. As Blair Davenport said, it's a crown jewel. It really is a crown jewel, and not just for Boulder City, for southern Nevada. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Chelsea West. I've been a resident of the Historic District for the last 18 years, and I don't think I could put it any better than Ray just did, and I really think that our water treatment building and the surrounding property should be zoned as government park. I grew up here. I'm now raising my children here. I live at 405 Ash. I'm within 30 feet of Teddy Fenton's statue park, and I see people there every day. It's not an underutilized space, and so many people enjoy it, and I would like to see it stay that way. Yes, there are other ways we could improve the use of the inside of the building, whether it be the host of a farmer's market or a small coffee shop or something like that during daylight hours. We don't need another commercial business that's going to go on into the night, but we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the zoning, and I think it is best zoned as a government park. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Cheryl Waits. A couple of questions that were asked about maintenance of the block that contains the properties in the building that we're talking about. They are presently administered and maintained by Parks and Rec and Public Works. So anytime if we have an issue or if it's just down to day-to-day maintenance, it's either one of those departments that we see. Looking forward to uses specifically of the building, just a step back. I retired as a horticultural specialist with the state of Nevada. I worked extensively with the Las Vegas Valley Water District and the Southern Nevada Water Authority in not only the desert demonstration gardens that preceded, but our Springs Preserve that we have now. It was used as a multifaceted educational outreach, not only in gardening world, but also in a social aspect of Southern Nevada. And we do see that there is a great opportunity for not only the building, but the surrounding parks and gardens that could be used for that. UNLV UNR, Clark County School District, and University of Nevada Cooperative Extension are presently doing a survey and polling on that to see that we couldn't have that area or that block as historic educational outreach that would reach out not only to bring participants and people in, but also be able to get back to the community. It would be based on the premise that the building could be used either temporarily for special events, or that it could have programming that is done through Clark County School District, or through Nevada System of Higher Education. They're interested, they'd like to see that. We would be bringing more business in. Star Farmers Market, I've heard that mentioned a couple of times. Very interested in coming back to Boulder City. So I do know that even if we looked at it as having it as a museum of sorts, that's a great idea. And it is something that has been researched. We did feasibility and research into this several years ago, and reached out as far as Russia and also to Baltimore. We found past filtration plants that were remodeled, and now they are up and running in multicultural style that is inspirational and also hopeful for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this hand in the very back corner, with yes.
My name is Kevin Tibbs, longtime Boulder City resident. Just had a couple comments. One of them being, it sounds like the city's options are open, leaving it as is. From what I've heard, there's nothing restricting the city to do as it pleases with it right now, leaving it as commercial zoning. So I guess I don't see the need to change the zoning. It sounds like it's more of a way to try and block certain uses that I don't think have really been explored yet, at least not in the public forum, where, like some people have pointed out, where we can discuss what we think would be nice there. I did go through one of the tours. I think it's an awesome building as well, and when I went into it, I thought, wow, this would be really cool as this or this or this. Right now, it's really closed off to the public. It's not used. We have access to it maybe once a year for a quick tour, but I would much rather see it actually used. I think some people fear that it's going to be torn down, and I don't really see that happening. I would much prefer that we explore the options, and if we change the zoning now, kind of tying our hands, and we're making it harder in the future to look at different potential uses for that property. It also sounds like everything is being grouped together right now, and I think a lot of people could see, okay, the statue park stays as it is, and maybe the gardens stay as they are, and the building could be used for something completely different. I don't know. The main thing I would want to see is that the public actually gets to use it and actually see it. I think the city's had, 30-something years to do something with it, and nothing has really happened. I fear that if we designate it as a park, it's just going to stay like that, and it's going to continue to be closed down, and we'll have tours every once in a while. To address what Commissioner Lassoff said, I have thought about one thing as far as using it as a park, and that idea came from when I saw some plans for the pool and potentially the multi-purpose or the multi-use building being taken out as part of that pool being built, that whole property being developed. And I thought, well, maybe that could be a potential use. But as I think about it, I know that building is going to cost a ton of money to fix up, and I don't know that the city's going to be willing to do that. And I think potentially a private owner is probably the best way to do that, to actually bring it back to life. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Judy, you had your hand up earlier, please.
Judy DeShane. I was thinking about what it could be used for, and the museum thing is great. It probably wouldn't generate a lot of money, but there's no reason that you couldn't put up pictures of from back when, you know, like they had at the 60th party. There are so many of those, but they aren't displayed any place, so they aren't available to the citizens to see on a regular basis. So you could use it as a museum, but that would not preclude using it as a rental property for private parties. You know, they have a milestone birthday party, a 50th birthday party, or a wedding party, or something like that. So you could generate a little bit more money doing things like that. You could also have it, use a corner of it or a part of it or whatever. We have some marvelous artists here in town. They're really very good and well known, and even having a corner where they could display their art and possibly, you know, put prices on it. If somebody's interested, they could buy it. So which would help part of our community. It might also encourage children to take up one of the arts and things like that. So there are a number of things, and doing one thing with it, in my mind, does not preclude using it in other respects, that they wouldn't conflict at all, and you could do, you know, multiple things all at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, with the pen in your hand.
My name's Blair Davenport. I also want to mention I work for the National Park Service, and so in answering your question of how to use it or what are uses for a park, parks mean something different for everybody, from national parks to state and local parks. Parks mean whatever the community or the municipality wants them to be. They mean whatever input you can get from the community as far as how they'll be used or utilized. I just want to point out that the Boulder City Historic BCHAF, Boulder City History and Arts Foundation, we held a public meeting last February at the library, and we solicited ideas and suggestions from the public. We would like to, I'd be happy to share with you what those ideas are, and there were a lot that were talked about today. At that meeting, nobody talked about the need for selling the property. So it seemed, at least at that meeting, from a lot of people, that maintaining the property as a park seemed to be, at least at that time, the primary goal for that property. And also to answer your question about what is a park or how do you define a park, there's an example here in Boulder City where I believe ABC Park, that's called a park, but that's being used as a fitness center. There's an art center, I believe, there, and they're considering leasing some of the property or the land there for lend-a-hand. So again, parks can mean all different kinds of things, whether they're open space, whether they have historic buildings on them, whether they have trails. In this regard, this property seems to be, at least from what I've garnered from the public, to be a park that includes a community garden, a reflections sculpture park, and a historic property that, in my opinion, has lots of many uses available to it through, like I mentioned earlier, different lease agreements, perhaps. Whether it's a museum, coffee shop, wedding venue, whatever, as long as it is maintained within the city's property or is maintained by the city, I think is the best use of that property rather than selling it to somebody where we run the risk of losing any kind of community value or input to that property. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Larry Turner. In February 27, 2018, the agenda for the City Council included a resolution to put on the ballot, Resolution 6746, which just asked, it was a simple question regarding that 1.92 acres. Would you like the city to sell it, or would you like the city to not sell it? It was a question asked just to get a poll for the feel of the people in the city. When it went before the council to determine whether to put it on the ballot or not, then Councilman McManus raised the question of deed restrictions and, don't want to lose control of the property, you don't want someone to tear it down. The city attorney, whose name I have here somewhere, Morris, told him that the ballot measure didn't require the city to sell it. It just answered the question, would the public like them to sell it? They didn't have to sell it. They would have every opportunity to apply deed restrictions to it before they sold it. All the question was, take the pulse. What do people really want to do with that building? My brother Ray Turner back here is adamant about his position, and he's passionate about it. And I appreciate that. And I have my opinions, and I've had them for a long time. I was this close from buying that building 17 years ago. But there are 15,000 people that aren't here. And probably most of them don't even know we're here, because when you advertise a meeting like this, it's within 750 feet of the property, and you put it in the RJ, and you put a sign on the property. I would guess 95% of the Boulder City residents don't even know this is happening tonight. So I don't see a problem with asking that question. I mean, we've got 30, 40 people here. That's not enough to decide what to do. And rezoning it to me is just one more way to block the will of the people by making it more difficult to get anything done. I would like to see it left as is, put on the ballot next time around, and get an answer. If the majority of the people say they would like that building to just stay like it is and continue to deteriorate, then I wouldn't be happy with it, but I would be satisfied with it. I don't think that would be the answer. I think people would love to see that beautiful building be rejuvenated, be put into service some way. You know, we run restaurants and wedding venues. If we happen to wind up with that building, there's a good chance we might try and do something like that. I don't really care. I mean, I would love to get the building. I don't care if somebody gets the building or if the city keeps the building. Maybe you should add something to the ballot. Would you like the city to designate $1 million to refurbishing this building and repurposing it for some community use? So far, the city hasn't spent really a penny on the building. They put up plywood over the windows and shot nails into the brick, which you can't replace. And that's about the extent of the city's maintenance for that property that I've seen. We did do some graffiti removal because they wanted to do some tours, but I'm sure most of you have been in the building and you see the state of disrepair. And the money to put that into shape where it would be a legal government building to go into with all the ADA requirements, that's a lot of money. So whichever way it goes, I think it just should be it should at least be put to the people to have their opinion heard, rather than just the people who are most vocal about it. You know, I appreciate they're the most concerned people. They're the ones who have a really heartfelt opinion about it. I appreciate all that, but it's too good of a building to just sit there and deteriorate. Something needs to happen to it that's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Powell. I live at 417 Birch Street, which is just one property away from this property. And I've lived there for 28 years. This property should be a government park. It's had a long history that it was not really cities owned for 35 years. That's part of the problem with the landscaping and the maintenance of the area. I'm going to say something about the community gardens. The community gardens are managed by Parks and Rec, so if there's anything about why they look bad, you look at our Parks and Rec. Okay, because the gardeners would love to keep that up and keep it beautiful, but they manage it and they decide who goes in and who goes out. The last year, they gave 5 people new gardens, and none of them gardened this entire year. Okay, so that is a problem that they don't solve. Okay, so if the gardens look bad, that's the reason. There is not 25 people on the waiting list, there are 12. Just last week, one of my friends told me she got on the list and she was 12th on the list. Okay. Yes, there could be more gardens out there. The whole property could be maintained and beautified and landscaped, and it could be done with nonprofits getting grants to do that kind of work. The building is not deteriorating. It is beautiful, and I'd like to ask everyone to stop thinking it has to have a use. What's the use of a flower? What's the use of the sculptures in the garden? The building sitting there just as it is the beautiful thing. I have been in parks all over the world where there were buildings that were not open to the public, but they were there for people to enjoy. That building can just sit there and be there for people to enjoy. It has been there for 80 years? And it is still intact. It didn't even really leak the roof. Yes, there was graffiti. It was very interesting graffiti. But graffiti is not damage, okay? It's not that kind of damage. It's not beat up inside. It's not falling apart. And the whole area could be beautified and made better. That's why we need to have it become a government park, so we can work on these things, making this a beautiful park that citizens can use as they do every single day as a park. Thank you. Not as a commercial space, not as a commercial venture. It's in a residential area. It's off the main drag here. It's not going to work as a commercial venture for anybody. Okay, it's on the edge of town. It's in a residential area. Make it a government park. Let us make a park out of it. Let us make it beautiful, because we can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Libby.
Yes, sir.
Britt West, 536 Cherry Street, 528 Cherry Street, 532 Cherry Street. What this is an issue of corrective zoning. The use has been as a park for many years. However, the zoning did not keep up with it. As Ms. Danielowitz mentioned, there's some other areas that need to be cleaned up in the city as well with regards to zoning. So the use needs to be conforming with the zoning, and right now it's not. I'm going to agree that it's not, as I said earlier, it's not utilized to its highest and best use. And perhaps the best thing to come out of this discussion is a greater public awareness of the park and the fact that we can do something with it. I wasn't aware of some of these meetings that have been held regarding the use of the park, and now I'm going to stay a lot closer tuned to it. With regarding alternative uses, I think we need to consult the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? The people who live nearby, the people who garden, the people who go there. I think that if you consult the stakeholders, come up with a summary of ideas, figure out which idea is best in some sort of a town hall situation, eventually a good idea will emerge. We've had some great ideas here today. I'm in favor of some sort of a museum, but I haven't heard all the ideas yet. I don't like it just sitting there. It could be something else. So I'm glad there's a greater level of awareness. The last thing I want to leave you with is this is corrective zoning. It wasn't done the first time. It's time to get it done right this time. Thank you.
Grant Turner, back one more time. If I could, maybe with a show of hands, is anybody not in favor of letting the residents vote on this?
What are you asking?
Is anybody not in favor of letting the residents vote?
No, I'm not.
Does anybody else see the irony that that's what she's doing here is voting? She's okay.
It's not irony, Grant. The thing is, it depends upon how you do the ballot.
The purpose of a industrial building, the form is dictated by its function. So an industrial building with no function it just can't exist. I think by definition that building needs a function. As far as the current zoning, it's surrounded. It's currently zoned commercial. It's surrounded on three sides by commercially zoned properties. And if I'm wrong, I would love to be corrected. But it is surrounded by commercial use. If we get into its uses, we inevitably get into the economics of it, which is, and by the way, I agree with almost everybody here. I would love to see it in a museum. I think it would be a beautiful museum, just like my uncle, Ray Turner over there. I agree, it would be a terrific museum. We've been saying that for over a decade, but it requires a substantial amount of money for that to happen. Well, easily $1 million. Where is that money going to come from? Okay, maybe it's grants, but where are these grants? We're 37 years into this process and nothing has emerged. We have no grants in place. There's one way to guarantee that that money comes up, and that would be using the private sector. To Blair's point, I respect the concern about the property being sold, and I think that there's a way around that. A long-term lease with some sort of tenant improvement allowance, or as my father said, maybe the city invests $1 million into getting that building tenant improvement ready, what we call gray shell. $1 million would get it there. But in order to do that, to be fiscally responsible, you cannot invest $1 million into a structure just to leave it closed off to the public. It would need some type of use. It would need some type of lease to justify that investment. Something that the community gets to weigh in on. I certainly appreciate that. In my opinion, the correct course of action is to, right now, it's an issue of the parcel map. The Reflections Park needs to be parceled out, which can be very easily done. That can be parceled out and zoned as a park, which it should be. It should have been done a long time ago. At which point, now you've got the rest of the site that the city can decide on without conflating any parks into the conversation, because people, and understandably so, people would get concerned about that. The issue of private versus public ownership, again, that needs to be addressed, but it's the use. The building needs to be used. To continue to sit vacant is a crime. What percentage of Boulder City's population do you think has actually been able to go in and appreciate that building? Do you think 1,000 Boulder City residents have gone in there? Do you think it can't be half, right? Can it be a third? Do you think there's even could it be 1%? The Boulder City residents deserve to go in and appreciate that building. To continue to leave it boarded up and continue to be vandalized is doing a disservice to the building. Thank you.
Who was up first?
My name is Neil Sinaikin. That building, if it sat there and was never used again and was just something to look at and enjoy and appreciate the architecture and the land around it, I would be content. Staff should have had the costs here tonight. It's not that hard to gather the water bill, the liability portion. Nothing has been done to maintain that building because you've had city councils that don't give a damn about historic preservation. Nothing has been done, and what happened, what Mr. Turner was talking about, in 2018, there was a push to sell that in the hangar. The city met with a lot of resistance, and they backed off. They saw that that wasn't going to go anywhere. So that's really not an issue. The public doesn't want to sell that building. When the hotel was in horrible disrepair 20 years ago, it was pushed as a public use in a public building, and the community got behind it. Nothing has been done for this building and the hangar. It's like a stepchild because of the failure of the staff and the city. We just recently became a CLG, a certified, what does CLG stand for? It means you can get money from the state. 25 years went by and staff did nothing to even get a status to get grant money. We could have got grant money to help maintain that building. If you look at the expenses of that building to keep it just sit there, they aren't very high, and they could easily be paid by running tours through that building, as Mr. Turner and other people have done. As for the vandalism, of itself is a crime that you can't put some motion lights up there and an alarm and get all the keys back that are outstanding to that building so you know that building is secure. As far as Mr. Laszlo's comment about asking me what my ideas are, that's why we've appointed you as a planning commissioner, Mr. Laszlo. It's the job of the planning commission to hold meetings and gather ideas to do this. The Planning Commission doesn't just hear variances. It's the job of the Planning Commission to institute studies and gather this kind of information, not to ask me in a reason to not go ahead with this method. For Mr. DeTeresa, for you to say that it's going to block further exploring into uses, so you come back on another Wednesday. Somebody comes up with a good idea, and that's immediately turned back based on a use. The Turners have many bars. They have many restaurants. I personally don't see every single building in Boulder City turned into a bar for the purpose of profit. I don't see things that way, and I find it disingenuous to present a bunch of straw arguments to go against this, camouflaging the idea that this is profit-oriented so that the Turners can make it into a restaurant. They've pitched this for a couple of years, and I would appreciate them just saying, we want to put a bar and a restaurant in. Somebody should tell the Turners that that requires a conditional use. Their operation cannot even be approved by a conditional use. A conditional use doesn't even allow what they want. Also, there would be such an outcry if they want to see people talk about turning that into a restaurant with music, and you'll see people turn out. So it's up to the Planning Commission to do the same thing that was done with the hotel, to organize studies and gather people to get something going. The staff has done nothing for historic preservation. I was on the first Historic Preservation Committee in 1996, and since then, nothing has been done. Zippo. Stuff has deteriorated. The avenues have been allowed to not receive grant money. people have just done nothing. It's a shame that we just got a certified a CLG a year ago when we could have been getting grant money that would have helped pay for that and other work is criminal. And I don't want to see another administration like the Woodbury administration get back in 2 years and have to deal with this. If we put it into a government use now, Mr. DeTeresa, if a use comes up, we'll have another Wednesday meeting, consider that, and then weigh whether we want to make it into that use. One of the key things to get behind this is if you show dedication that we're committed to making this a government use, I'll step up or somebody will step up and say, yeah, we'll go ahead with it. But if you have it commercial and I put up money and then the Turners under the next administration get it back, why should I waste money if it isn't certain that it's going to go toward a museum or some other public use? Let's just be honest about it. I don't want to see every building in Boulder City turned into a bar for profit and then straw dogs presented on why it can't happen. Thank you.
In the red t-shirt, sorry. It's the easiest way to identify from here.
That is one of the reasons why I wear it. My name is Greg Todd. I've been a Boulder City resident for 15 years. I've looked at that building for many, many years when I worked for the City of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. That building is a historical relic that is not to be ruined, not to be built into a restaurant for profit or bar or wedding venue, whatever they want to do. There's buildings in downtown Boulder City that can be easily utilized for that purpose. That to me is a mechanical marvel. The gentleman that talked about it, mechanical engineer, I'm very familiar with that. I have actually gone in on behalf of Water and Power and restored buildings that are over 100 years old mechanically. It can be done. It can be done to where it's an interactive thing for kids and young adults that can take and look at another different angle and avenue of trade and way to make money as a career. That's something we're not doing. We're pushing everybody into colleges and everything else. That would be a hands-on interactive museum. It would be awesome to be a part of. And I'd be willing right now in front of everybody here in the meeting room and everything to volunteer my time and expertise in looking at it and seeing what can be done about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? Yes, in the white shirt.
I'm just here for the entertainment, Tyson Smith. Just by looking through the zoning on it, you talk about turning it into a museum. A museum is classified as a C2, if I'm not mistaken. So by taking it down to a further level, farther down, it makes it even harder to turn it back into a museum. So we've got to be careful on where we put this right now, because as you mentioned, has been mentioned before, once you move it, it's harder to move back up that ladder once you go down it, or vice versa. And that's would be my only concern from my point of view. Like I said, I can see great purposes coming from it either way. I don't have a side. I just worry about the concept of zoning something and then come back and try to do something with it that you've just made it so it's impossible to do. Am I mistaken by that museums fall under C2?
They do, but that's not necessarily to say that a museum couldn't also be potentially allowed in the park zone, although our code language should probably be amended to clarify any additional uses that could be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Would anyone else like to be heard on this matter? Oops, up in the front.
Yes, my name's Herschel Mooney. I was born and raised here. And I went by that building all my life because I grew up in McKeeversville. And I'll tell you a little bit about that building. My friend's grandpa worked that building when it was in service. And we went for little tours and stuff and that. And a long time we had the railroad, but then the train started coming to town, and look at what it's done. that railroad didn't do anything. They stopped it going by my house and took that up, and the old train used to run down to the dam and on and on. But anyway, other things has changed in this town towards, it just was sitting there and then it came around. And I believe the hotel, because I worked with the Burts and different people on the old hotel, where the hotel wasn't all working. We had some of it working, and then they added more working and fixing because the building was terrible. It had a lot of problems. But look at what we did with it, with people putting grant money in, donations, whatever they did, and the hotel is unbelievable. But at one time, it was pretty shambles, and the outside of it, my friend took and went and painted it, everything a couple of years ago, and the windows were so worn out. They were loose in the building, but he glued them back in and done everything he could do till they upgrade the windows. But those windows are still there. Everything kept being repaired up with a really super failing air conditioning unit. Now it's all up with good air conditioning and these things. And it wasn't all done at one time. And I believe that building can be partially used. If the city needs the money so bad, that's a big problem. But I don't see that building not being turned into something with working with the public and people to keep it intact in what it is. Because, I mean, that's an awesome building. Everybody goes by it when they have the art in the park, these different activities, and it could be included in a tour with the art in the park and different things with people knowing they're donating money for this, and they will do it. Just like we took and rebuilt the hotel and other things around town, and we don't need to take no more things out of this town like that. And I just really love the city, and I thank you all for being here and doing this, but we need to let everybody have some input and not make no big decisions on anything right now, I don't believe. And I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Going once? Anyone else want to be heard on this matter? Going once? Going twice? I'll close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission for discussion and a motion. So we've certainly, I'm just going to give a brief overview, I think, of what I've heard. So our order of business tonight, of course, is to choose how we want to proceed. Of course, one option would be to leave it as it is, as a commercial, residential, I think neighborhood commercial zoning, or the resolution is to, I guess, vote A or nay as to whether to convert to the zoning to government park. I don't think the discussion we certainly aren't discussing whether the property should be brought up for sale, but just what the zoning of that parcel should be. So with that being said, does anyone have some ideas they'd like to discuss or motion?
A couple of thoughts, comments. To address Mr. Sinaikin's comment to me, I know that I'm smart enough to know that I don't have all the ideas, and that's why I asked the community. And I don't think that the community has had detailed enough discussion, workshops, town halls to talk about this. And this seems like the community needs to make this decision, and I don't feel that it was appropriate from council to push this forward without having talking with the community first. So that's my standpoint.
Thank you.
I'd like to I have a few comments, and I'd actually like to jump in. Probably fits in with a little bit of what Nate is saying, only I have a different take. I think, first of all, I'm very impressed that we've seen this kind of a turnout tonight. We don't normally get this, and I think it's actually good, because actually that is what this commission is about. We are supposed to just present and hear from the voters what their feelings are on a specific situation like this rezoning, and then we are able to take that input, kick it around, and present it forward to, of course, council, who will then have further hearings. But that brings me to the point that I'm really most concerned about, and that is, and I heard a good term, corrective zoning, and I'm going to pick up on it in this way. I personally have a strong belief that we are well overdue in doing a comprehensive master plan update. Now, there are two aspects to the comprehensive master plan update that is important. Number one, it looks at the build out. It looks beyond the current build out area. It will also look at corrective zoning within the current build out area. And the beauty of a true comprehensive master plan, if done correctly, is done with a full input from all citizens through many different mechanisms. It is not just done through one workshop or whatever. And I am sorry, but we're broken as a city. We have never made the effort to do that. And I hope, and again, I'm just a commissioner trying to influence at least what I can, including influencing council. I hope council picks up the ball, because if they don't, we're not going to get anywhere. Now, just to bring it back to reality, we are a historic town. We sell ourselves that way. So anything that doesn't support that is not necessarily good. And so when you have a case like this, which is really saying, do we take something that may have been really incorrectly zoned and have an opportunity to put it back into what is a real compatibility with the residential area and with the direction of the city to be historic, and the potential to create a government park and any possible uses that, again, that's what the citizens need to come forward with. So my personal position is this is it is a worthwhile zone change. I see it as being very compatible with the residential area. I see the direction that it would take would help ensure it stays in that direction, whether monies are put into it right away or not. But I think the fact that the council actually put it on an agenda to be relooked at already says there is a level of commitment there. So I guess that's my comment.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the commission have any comments before I jump in with mine? Okay. Well, I think all I can say quite simply is that I think you're on the right track. I think from the perspective of zoning consistency, I certainly support this effort. It certainly doesn't end any discussion regarding future commercial use, and perhaps it simply protects a piece of Boulder City's history. I do agree that the council and the citizens of Boulder City need to decide what direction to go, but I do feel that this piece of property is worth protecting at this moment, and so I frankly support this resolution. And having not seen a lot of other comment, we do have the opportunity to comment after a motion is made. So if it's within my purview, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 1186 as written.
Can we have further discussion?
We certainly can have further discussion after there's a second. We just need a second.
It dies without a second.
I know.
Okay, can I ask?
There's a second is needed so that you can discuss the motion.
Right. Right. So I've made a motion. I need a second if we want to discuss.
I'll second it then, if that's the case.
Thank you.
Sorry, don't understand that point. I'll second it, yes. My only question really has to do, and I heard the comment, if museum is not, which is, I have to admit, is probably one of the more logical things it could become at some level or however, but within the GP zone, would it actually have to come back before the before the commission if a museum use was designated by the city? Or can it just be the city could just go forward with whatever kind of planning they had to perhaps use the building in some capacity that way? I'd like to understand. I don't know.
In the government zones, there are no conditional uses.
Okay.
All of the uses in the government zone do not have to come before the planning commission. Basically, the council, would authorize uses.
Okay. But could, under the zoning, museum be, could a museum use be actually incorporated? Because it doesn't say that right now in the current code.
One of the things we'd have to look at is what is being proposed as that museum in relationship with the existing zoning. As it's been stated already this evening, it is very specific in terms of the uses that are allowed under the park component. So depending on what was being proposed, potentially it would require a text amendment to expand that use for a museum to go there.
Okay, so maybe where I'm really going with my question is that could we add an amendment to the resolution as it's proposed here that would do something to the effect of adding a potential for right now for the possible future use of a museum within the zone, or to do a text amendment? I'm just asking.
Yeah, no. The only thing that's before the Planning Commission this evening is the question of rezoning the property.
Okay, so we can't recommend that as a possible thing.
It wouldn't be part of your resolution, but certainly the minutes of this meeting are going to reflect that, and will be going forward to the city council. And the public hearing for the city council is scheduled for February 11th.
Okay, I've succeeded at what I wanted to do. Thank you. I'm fine with doing whatever.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I got one more question of staff. Susan, did I understand you right that once it is zoned government park, that means that the council has authority to do with whatever they want to do with that land without citizen input?
Per the zoning. The zoning right now states that only park and recreation uses are allowed in that zone. But yes, a park and recreation use would not have to come before the planning commission because it's allowed by right in the GP zone.
Thank you.
Any other comment on part of the commission? In that case, I'll ask to bring this to a vote. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, did you get? No. Can those who said aye speak up again?
Aye.
Aye.
Just two? Okay. And then you want to call for the nays?
And all those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Aye. Very good. So I think
Commissioners, it's usually best to have some motion in a positive form. So now that the motion to approve the resolution has failed, you may wish to have a motion recommending against, and your motion could list what reasons you would like listed in that motion for that recommendation.
And
would somebody like to propose a motion?
I will make a motion that the
resolution
I will make a motion that the city council should probably consult with the citizens, or should consult with the citizens via town halls, workshops, massive public outreach to every citizen of Boulder City about what we want to do with this land before we rezone it.
Actually, that's not, yes.
What do you need?
I apologize
And the
for, I apologize for if I confused you. The motion you would make at this point is to recommend that the zoning not be changed. You may support that with whatever findings you choose for that recommendation, but it's not a recommendation for other council action.
The option of not.
Yeah, and actually,
I'll make a motion to deny.
Actually, and I'll clarify further again after further thought. I'm confusing this with something like a resolution for a conditional use permit, where that action normally stops with the planning commission, in which case then, if there's not a motion to pass a resolution, the item simply is not acted on. In this case, it's a recommendation to council, so if you're not passing the resolution, it's effectively a recommendation that the zoning stay the same. So you do not need to make a motion in this case. In the alternative, it's a variance where that would be called for because you need a positive action on one motion or another. In this case, it's a recommendation, so the recommendation for the proposed rezoning failed. So I apologize for confusing you. You do not need to make another motion.
Thanks.
I just want to hear what they're...
Well, so do we need any? That's what...
I believe that it would be appropriate, based on the staff report, that if there is a desire by the Planning Commission to make a motion to deny the recommendation, to do so, and just vote on that matter.
Okay.
Then I will make that motion to deny the recommendation.
I will second that motion.
We'll go to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
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 So yes means no.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying that.
All right, so resolution 1186 has failed, and the recommendation to City Council is denied that, or to leave the zoning as is. Very good. All right. Next item on the agenda, monthly progress report on development allotments.
No comment.
And final item is last public comment. Would any of the public wish to be heard on this? Mr. Sanayakan and Ms.
One of the things I wanted to point out is I haven't studied the transfer of that property in a couple of years. I remember there was a transfer document on the second to last page, in the middle of that page, that says when that parking lot and when the other little lot aren't used, they revert back to Boulder City. And I talked to Stephen Morris about this back then, and I don't understand, unless there's something I'm not aware of, why that hasn't reverted back to Boulder City. There was a provision in that agreement that the Bureau of Reclamation was using that at the time, and when they stopped using it, they would give up the right to it. So I think that Mr. Moore should look at that and see why, after all these years, given that the use has stopped, why that property hasn't been put back into title unless there's something that I'm missing. I supported putting this into park. I support it because I think it's the right thing to do. I think it would encourage people to put money up and into it. And I see that it'd be very easy at a later date, if there was a use that came along that didn't quite fit, that we could turn this back. My personal feeling is that there was a lack of information about the zoning and what the uses were, that I didn't hear that the Planning Commission really understood how we could convert it into a museum. And I think that the issue about cost wasn't well presented, of how little that building cost the city. I didn't hear all of the reasons why this wasn't supported. I'll go back and I'll listen to the tape. So I see some ambiguity and some unclarity as to why this wasn't supported. As for your comment, Mr. Laszlo, the way that you asked the person that brought it up, my personal feeling was it was a tool to flip it back onto them. I didn't hear you ask the question to solicit input. I felt that it turned it back onto them to come up with a reason, and I didn't think that was fair to what I saw, to put them on defensive. So I'm going to ask the council to look at this, and I'll probably appeal your decision in order to get enough information out on cost, on zoning and things, and the ease of putting this back, that you may wish to have the public do. And it'll be of benefit to the Turners, because through the appeal process, it will bring people more in to hear all of this and give people a chance to look at it. This was a public hearing. This is the purpose of public hearing. People that had an interest were notified within 750 feet, and people came. And as you know, for a planning commission turnout, this is huge. How many people come to your meetings regularly? Not very many. So that's the purpose of a public hearing. So we did have the process. But I think that at the next meeting, if I appeal this and staff comes up with better answers on cost to hold the property, on conversion to other uses, and some of the things that you may not have been clear on, and it has another level before the council has to look at this again, that may be helpful. So I'll consider doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy.
Judy DeShane. I'll make this short and sweet because I know everybody's getting tired. I was in favor of making it a government park in order to protect it. I have no problem donating money to things that I know that are going to be for the good of the public. As one person mentioned, if you don't know what's going to happen to the thing, you don't want to put your money in only to help a private party. You want it to go to the community. So I am disappointed it didn't get the protection I thought it needed. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Twice? I hereby close the meeting. Thank you all for your participation tonight. We sincerely appreciate it.